In order to fully understand Rumiko Takahashi and her contributions to the field of manga as a whole, you have to understand her place within that field. And that involves examining her influences, peers, and followers. This is what Orbiting Rumic World is dedicated to exploring. The artist who most influenced the look and development of Rumiko Takahashi's drawing style is without a doubt Ryoichi Ikegami. Yes, this Ryoichi Ikegami. But Takahashi was already a follower before he adapted his naturalistic style. Her style was based on this. Debuting at just 17 years old in the Kashihan, or book rental market, Ryoichi Ikegami was born in Fukui, Japan, on May 29, 1944. In 1967, while visiting her father's medical practice, 10-year-old Rumiko Takahashi was first exposed to the work of Ikegami. Picking up an issue of Garo in the waiting room, she was blown away by what she saw. The graphic, dramatic story Natsu, Summer, by Ikegami was her first encounter with the artist who would go on to have such an impact on her. The previous year, in the same magazine, his story Sumi no Ishiki was noticed by Shigeru Mizuki, one of the biggest names in manga at the time, famed for his smash hit Gegege no Kitaro. Mizuki invited Ikegami to move to Tokyo and work as one of his assistants, which Ikegami gladly accepted. Another one of Ikegami's idols, Yoshihiro Tsuge, was already working as an assistant to Mizuki, and Ikegami jumped at the chance to work alongside him. Ikegami made a huge impression on Mizuki, so much so that in 1975, Mizuki would illustrate a story about the young Ikegami entitled Manga Kyo no Ji, Ikegami Ryoichi Den, that told the story of how they met, and Ikegami standing up to a particularly annoying fellow assistant at Mizuki Pro named Toyokawa. Ikegami would work for Mizuki for 2.5 years. This period would later be chronicled in Nunoe Mura's Gegege no Nyoibo, the novel and television series created by Shigeru Mizuki's wife, where Ikegami's character would be given the alias Keiichi Kurata. Rumiko Takahashi would later write in her autobiographical manga My Sweet Sunday about rediscovering Ikegami again in 1971 with his 3-part serial Ikari yo Saraba, Farewell to Anger, in Shonen Sunday, and then follow him religiously as he worked on the Japanese version of Marvel Comics' famous superhero Spider-Man, which was being published in Monthly Shonen Magazine, as well as Hitoribochi no Rin, All Alone Rin, being published in Weekly Shonen Magazine. In high school, Takahashi had begun to draw her own manga and was highly influenced by Ikegami's art style, copying his drawings from Spider-Man and Nanimo Iranai. It was at this time that Shogakukan editor Katsuya Shirai would poach Ikegami from Kodansha, leading to an unparalleled period from 1973 to 1979, where 2 simultaneous series from 2 different publishers would become his most mainstream hits to date. Aiueo Boy, written by Kazuo Koeki in Shonen Magazine, and Otoko Gumi, written by Tetsu Kariya in Shonen Sunday. The photorealistic style for which Ikegami is known began to show in his work at this time. This was followed by Otoko Ozora, then Mai the Psychic Girl. Mai the Psychic Girl would play a more important role in America than it did in its native Japan, as one of Viz Media's original launch titles. It is not hyperbolic to say that the 2 people most responsible for launching manga in the English-speaking world in the late 80s and early 90s are Rumiko Takahashi and Ryoichi Ikegami. Rumiko Takahashi had all of her series licensed for release by Viz. Ikegami's Crying Freeman, Sanctuary, and Samurai Crusader would all see popular releases by Viz as well. After Mai, Ikegami says he, quote, gave up on trying to top the popularity of otokogumi in shonen magazines. I started a new story called Kazuyoi Bito, Wounded Man, in Spirits. During the publication of Wounded Man, Koeki and Ikegami experimented with a new type of muscular, buff protagonist, Keisuke Ibaraki. But in the words of Ikegami himself in his interview with Katsumi Watabiki for tsite.jp, quote, the era of Rumiko Takahashi had begun, and this type of protagonist was unpopular. Ikegami decided that in the era of Takahashi, he should look to her work for inspiration, and so he introduced Misty, a character designed with Takahashi's sensibilities, who caused the series to rebound in popularity. Re-entering what Ikegami calls the world of manly romance led to Crying Freeman. His change from a shonen magazine to the seinen style of big comic spirits unshackled Ikegami and his collaborators to show more of the sex and violence that his series have become known for. The darker themes of Ikegami's work in shonen manga can be said to have helped birth the seinen genre. As his audience came of age with the violent and sexual imagery of his early shonen works, Ikegami himself states that he was able to use the themes of the era to his benefit. In an interview with tsite.jp, Ikegami states, quote, I was confident that I could draw with my own sensibility without being limited by what shonen manga was supposed to be. It was an era when shonen magazines began to understand that adults were reading the stories as well as children, and a few years later, I was drawing at the dawn of the birth of seinen magazines. These adult themes show through in the dark heroes of his works, who question the ideas of virtue and justice in the often corrupt worlds they live in. Many of Ikegami's works look to the real world for inspiration. 1990's Sanctuary was based on many real-life issues, including the recruit scandal within the Liberal Democratic Party in Japan. And 1996's Kyoko was based on an infamous 1995 Okinawa rape incident. Ikegami defines his style as focused on realism and beauty, saying, quote, I like to use realistic art to tell unrealistic stories. I draw what I think is the ultimate ideal. I want the readers to think, I'm glad I was born Japanese. His characters are imbued with a rebellious spirit of a truly Japanese nature. His complex use of shading, mixed with bold watercolor brushstrokes in his inking, create truly unique facial expressions. Currently, Ikegami has teamed with author Ryoichi Ikegami of iShield 21 and Dr. Stone fame to create Trillion Game. Ikegami has remained an in-demand creator his entire career, working with some of the best-known writers in manga. Noted names such as Kazuya Kudo, Bronson, and Rumiko Takahashi's own teacher Kazuo Koeki. It was via Takahashi studying under Koeki at Gekiga Sonjuku that she would eventually connect with her idol Ikegami. Takahashi and Ikegami even lectured together at Koeki's manga school about their approaches to storytelling and layout. Ryoichi Ikegami is a standout figure in the world of manga, a virtuoso artist, an iconoclast who has brought manga to America with his sensual drawings and anatomical naturalism.